All right, what's up? What's good? What's happening? What it do, baby? You are tuned in to another edition of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. It's your boy Xavier McKnight, aka X, aka Zay, joined by my brother from another, Kory Blackshear. Y'all know him as KB. Man, before we get into things, man, we cannot let it go without being said. KB recently celebrating a milestone birthday, turning 30 years of age, man. Getting old around here, but in all seriousness, happy belated, my brother. How you doing, man?
Appreciate you, man. Feeling good. Thank you, man.
And I mean, I'll be right there with you in a couple of months, Lord willing. So I mean, we starting to get up there. But let's go ahead and jump into the show, man. So KB, at the start of the NBA season, I would say about 15 games in, the Houston Rockets looked like an NBA championship contender. Looked like they finally had the missing piece they needed in Kevin Durant. We knew coming into the season, unfortunately, with Fred VanVleet's injury, the torn ACL that he suffered, that they were going to be down short of point guard, but we were waiting to see if Reed Shepherd could help fill in the void. And he did for the most part. And he had a great game last night against the Warriors, too. But ever since like the midway point of December to where we are now at the start of March, they feel like a middle of the pack playoff team. Just another playoff team out west. They're not in the same class with OKC, San Antonio, and Minnesota. I don't consider Denver to be in that class either, but that's a story for another day. And I'm just starting to wonder now about this team after losing to the Golden State Warriors last night by a final score of 115 to 113. Should be noted that the Golden State Warriors did not have in this game Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Kristaps Porzingis. It was Draymond Green and a bunch of other role players. So in my eyes, when you're Houston and you have KD, Amen Thompson, Alperen Sengun, that game shouldn't even have made it to overtime. You should have won that game running away, because we are at the point in the season now to where you have to start making a statement and making it known like, hey, we got to get into high gear. We got to hit that second gear on the gas to show that, okay, we're getting ready for the playoffs. We're getting into that mode. And before the All-Star break, KB, or right around the All-Star break, I should say, there were some things that leaked out about Kevin Durant having more burner accounts on X, formerly known as Twitter. And all of this is alleged right now. We don't know how true this is. But with those burner accounts, we saw him calling out former teammates, current teammates. And the way that things went last night, with the Rockets looking like they were shutting him out at times, the late game struggles, I'm starting to wonder, is that stuff starting to have an effect on the locker room? Because they look like a middle of the pack playoff team for a few months now, but now they don't even seem like they're together. And before I hand it off to you, I just want to give a prime example of what I'm talking about with that. During the timeouts last night, especially in overtime, the Golden State Warriors were all huddled around each other looking like they were one unit, one team. The Houston Rockets had no communication with each other, and they all were just kind of sitting around. That's the kind of stuff that sends a message loud and clear. Now, we're not in the locker room. We don't have feet on the ground as beat reporters in Houston, so we don't know what's really going on. What I do know is this. Ime Udoka has to try to get something back intact with that team. Maybe you need to play Reed Shepherd a little more than you played him. I don't know. But something just feels completely off. And I never depended on Kevin Durant to come into this locker room and be a leader, because from what we know about him, KB, all he wants to do is play ball. He doesn't care about all that leadership stuff. That's been the story of his career. And I'm not saying that Kevin Durant is not a leader, but he clearly makes it known that all he wants to do is play ball. And the only place he's been able to do that and be successful with like actually winning championships was the Golden State Warriors, because that was Steph Curry's team. So you didn't have to worry about all of that stuff. But where do you stand right now on the state of the Houston Rockets?
Like you said, it's kind of like they're teetering in that middle of the pack range. Like I'll give you an example of like where my concern level was last night. They gave up 60 points in the paint to a team that brought out a front court of Horford, Santos, and Draymond Green. That just lets you know, like, they're kind of not as together as we probably think they are, because there's no way a trio of the three that I just named should get 60 paint points against a team with Kevin Durant, Amen Thompson, Alfred Sengun, Clint Capella, just a few guys to name. Like I think that Kevin Durant, he does have, as great as a hooper as he does have some type of Achilles heel when it comes to just, being able to galvanize guys and help them come together. Because, like you said, that's not what he's focused on. He's a hooper. We can't discredit that. But I think when it comes to just his leadership style, it doesn't necessarily seem like it gels well with as far as getting the most out of guys. He could be a great teammate. I'm not saying that he's not, but it could be a thing to where he's not getting opportunities for his guys. He's not, bringing guys together. He's not that vocal leader during timeouts that's going to be able to just bring everyone in and say, all right, let's slow down this run. Let's get back to running our sets. Let's get back to doing the things that we did that got us here. I think that this was more of a gut check game because, like I said, with teams like San Antonio, OKC, teams just like, if you want to even put in teams like, I wouldn't right now, but like the Lakers or, some of those other teams that you're going to have to see possibly in the first round, you're going to have to be able to make adjustments. You're also going to have to be able to hit your stride before this end of the season because with a tight race in the West, it's looking like it may come down to where you may lose out on a top 6 seed, possibly by 1 to maybe 3 games. That's just how tight the race could be by the end of the season. I look at Kevin Durant, he's still putting his typical output. He finished last night's game with 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. But there is no way. I'm going to switch gears from Kevin Durant real quick. There is no way that Jabari Smith can play 42 minutes and produce 3 points. There's just no way. I refuse to believe that he can be on the court and remain in the rotation if he's giving out output like that. You also need more from Sengun because that was a game that was primed for him to dominate last night, and he just didn't do it. He went 8 for 20 from the field, and that's just not going to get it done. Like I said, I know that Reed Sheppard had an amazing game. Shout out to him. But just as a collective, they didn't do enough. I think that they are going to have to, have a real look in the mirror because, like I said, if they have championship aspirations this season, you can't drop games like this. I know it's just the beginning of March and, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you lose that top 6 seed because of 1 game or 2 games, it is going to be a big deal. So I look at Houston, they're going to regroup. I just think they're too talented. I'm not going to press the panic button. I do seem like there is a little something there, but I'm not going to press the panic button just yet. Do want to shout out Golden State, though. Undermanned, still without 3 of their top players. Like you said, no Jimmy Butler, no Steph Curry, no Kristaps Porzingis, and they still went out there and got it done. I got to give I'm going to say his name wrong, Pozinski. I'm going to just call him Pods. He played a hell of a game last night. He gets his criticism, which is, fair because you claim you want to be better than Steph Curry. You got to show it more consistently. I think that's very fair to say. D'Anthony Melton had another great game. So those two, in Steph Curry's absence, from a guard perspective, they did enough to control the game, not do anything foolish. They came out with a 2-point win against a playoff team in most people's eyes. Like I said, we can look at the struggles, but then, like I said, the other team still got to go out there and play. So I look at Golden State as I don't necessarily feel like this is something that they can consistently do without their stars, but I do look at this as a great outing for a couple of players that may just need to get into rhythm. Pies is going to be asked to be that guy because, like I said, if you're going to have that confidence, you got to show me a little something. Because when Steph does come back into the fold, how are you going to fit into the offense then? Same with D'Anthony Melton. If you're going to be that backup point guard, how are you going to fit into the offense once Steph comes back into the fold? Because we do know that the offense is catered around Steph Curry. I do think that, they are who they are at this point, the Golden State Warriors. Very limited with what they can do without certain players in the mix. Because, like I said, with Kristaps Porzingis, sometimes he plays, sometimes he doesn't. It's kind of really hard to really gel, chemistry-wise when he's not really out on the floor like that. So, I look at this as like this is like a one-off game. I don't really make too much of this from the Golden State side. I don't really make too much of this from Houston side either. I think that Houston just has to clean up some of the things that are a glaring issue right now so that they don't become a glaring issue, hopefully, in May. So we'll see where they both go from here. But I think that they need to kind of have a look in the mirror moment right now and come to God moment, go to film study, see what they are doing wrong, and just kind of, get it together.
Yeah, I'm glad you said what you said at the end about not looking into too much of this for Golden State, because I certainly don't. They're coming off of having just a horrible week with that cast of role players, and maybe that's why I'm reading into this so much for Houston. You said come May, depending on who they draw, I don't know if they're going to make it out of April. Just being honest with you, because both of these teams are in play-in territory right now. It's not a lot that the Houston Rockets are going to end up with one of those top 6 seeds out west right now. But you brought up Steph Curry, and when he comes back, I'm starting to question if he is going to come back, because this has been a lot of missed time for a knee injury that we haven't really heard too much about. But I bring this up, KB, because I wanted to touch on this before we go on to the next topic, because there's been a lot of talk of this lately. Do you think the NBA is eventually going to have to do away with this 65 game rule in terms of people being eligible for awards and different things like that? Because when they first introduced this rule, I was on board with it because I understood it was about trying to prevent load management. But now you have injuries that are happening to some of the star players around the game who we know are indeed those guys who are really of that ilk. And this is how you end up with guys being first, second, third, all team who normally would not be there. And it's like you're really only getting this award, no disrespect to what you're doing, but you're only really getting it probably because you're the most available player out there. And availability is the most important ability. I'm not knocking that in any way whatsoever. But let's say that Jokic or SGA were to miss more games. Let's say Cade Cunningham were to start having to miss games. Knock on wood for all of them that hopefully that doesn't happen. Jaylen Brown would be the only other person that you could look at and say deserves the league MVP. And if you take him out of the fold, I don't know who you give it to at that point. So do you think they're eventually going to have to do away with this 65 game rule?
Yeah, I think so. Just because of the point that you just said, like you don't want it to get down to that level. I think that they're gonna may even have to just for them to have to reduce the games even more is even crazier to think about. But like you said, you don't want it to get to a point where we're just giving it to the guy who's the most available rather than their body of work and what they did on the court in the games that they played. I do think there does need to be a limit. However, I think that, you can't play 40 games and then basically be available to win league MVP. I just think that that would be unfair to the guys who actually are going out there night in, night out. Because if I play 75 out of 82, yeah, your stats may be significantly a little bit better than mine, but they are not to the point where we can't have a discussion. If I play 75 out of 82 games, I think that that right there in itself should give me the nod over you. So it is going to be a case of where I think that they are going to have to lower the minimum number of games because you don't want to force injuries to where, we're seeing a lot of Achilles injuries now. You don't want to force those high ankle sprains for them to come back faster than they are like necessarily ready to play because some of those injuries just take a long time to nurse. And especially with some of the stars in the league being at advanced ages now, Steph being in his late 30s, LeBron already in his early 40s, KD being up there. You gotta kind of protect them a little bit because it's kind of like we know that the product that is being marketed the way it is because of the stars. So without your stars being in there, who knows what the product will look like.
Okay, you say that they have to protect them, and I agree with you on that. But should we give the league the benefit of the doubt in terms of feeling like they are trying to do something to protect those guys? And I say that because those guys are doing things at an advanced stage that we've never seen guys at an advanced stage come in and do as consistently as they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give the league a little bit of a doubt because, like I said, it's kind of like they're between a rock and a hard place because they're feeling pressure to actually make these guys play. Because from a fan standpoint, who do you come to the games to see? Do you come to see the role players? Do you come to see the superstars? And I'm just talking about from a casual fan experience. If I'm paying $300-$400 for tickets, yes, I'm coming to see the Steph Currys, the LeBrons, the Luka Doncic's of the world. I'm not, no disrespect to anybody else, but stars help drive the revenue in the league. And if they are not playing, if they're not available, yes, that's going to hurt the experience of a fan who may only be able to come see a game or two every season.
I'm going to answer your question for you. Here are the folks who are usually coming to see the role players play. Coaches that coach them, family members like grandma, pop, Uncle Earl, and all of them. Nobody, no disrespect to them. Congratulations, you made it to the league, but that's just the reality of the situation. Those are the people who are coming to see the role players play.
Yeah, so it's a tough situation. What you find yourself in is basically because, from one stance, the league had to enforce the 65-game rule to ensure that the stars are playing, because we are looking at not just the bottom dollar of the league, but we're looking at TV ratings. We're looking at a lot of things that go into why that 65-game rule was implemented. So it's not just as simple as, oh, we just want the stars to play. Why do we want the stars to play? Because it drives everything. If we don't get to see the stars play, that kind of, just refutes the idea of even having some of these nationally televised games with the hype that it used to have. X, I know you remember like when we used to have those Sunday afternoon games on ABC back in the day when, let's say, Kobe was playing the Miami Heat. Let's go ahead and just say that. Kobe Bryant and the Lakers were playing the Miami Heat. Could you imagine what the ratings would be if we didn't have Kobe Bryant playing? Two of the big three weren't playing. You would literally just be out there just like, okay, I'm watching it from a fan perspective, but not necessarily as a regular fan. Like, I'm looking at this because I enjoy the game of basketball. But from a casual fan standpoint, we wanted to see the stars.
I'm not going to hold you, KB. If the scenario that you just brought up, if Kobe's not playing, if two of the big three aren't playing, I'm not sitting down watching that game.
Exactly.
We used to get out of church on Sundays to sit down and go watch those games after we've eaten Sunday dinner or whatever the case may be. And that's just how it used to be. If it was without Kobe or two of those big three, man, we finding something else to watch, or we going to fix another plate or getting ready for the school week or something. We're not watching that.
Yeah, and that's like kind of where I'm getting at with the whole thing, because like I said, we want to see the stars play. We just don't want to see them. Of course, we don't want injuries on anyone, but we also don't want them to just take rest games just for the hell of it, just to say that we just don't feel like playing on a random Tuesday in March, or we don't feel like playing on a random Thursday in December. Like, it has to get to a point.
Now, I do agree with that. But here's what I also have to push back on a little, and it's not anything that you said. It's what has been said mainly about this whole load management argument. People do understand that this started with a coach doing this, right? This didn't start off with the players. This started off with Greg Popovich doing this more than a decade ago with the San Antonio Spurs, where they had a national TV game against the Miami Heat, I believe it was, and Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and I think Kawhi Leonard as well. I don't think any of them were scheduled to play. And this is when David Stern, God rest his soul, was still commissioner, and called the San Antonio Spurs like, hey, what's all this about? And this is something that ended up continuing to be a pattern as they continued to go on. Now, you understand it in some cases with some of those guys like Duncan and guys because they were getting older, and you want to try to keep them as fresh as possible for the upcoming postseason run. But to not have any of them play, yeah, that's inexcusable. So I can't completely bash the players all the way on this. Yes, you should be out there playing. You should be out there showing up to work and doing your job. But a coach is the one that set the precedent for this to happen in the first place. Before Popovich started doing this, you didn't even know that teams even thought of doing things like this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do remember that time when, this was all. I remember a time when this was the norm, and also remember a time when this was never heard of. Like, there are stars that want to play. I don't think that, I think that the guys that we're highly critical of for not playing. I do feel like that there is a passion level for the game. They do want to be out there. I do think that there are certain things that, from an organizational standpoint, they may tell them. You may have coaches, trainers, even saying, "Hey, you might just need to take it easy tonight. We may not need you tonight." So I don't feel like it's just the players always making this decision. I do just think that they have more, flexibility to make these decisions now because they do realize that, do you need me now in December or do you need me in June?
But I feel like I got a solution to some of this. If you don't want them to play the complete game, just put them on a minutes restriction. Play them 25 minutes. Play them 30 minutes. You don't have to play. You don't have to play them a full 40 if that's what you want to do.
But do you think that'll make more national attention if we got a guy like if a game is highly competitive and we got, let's say, Steph Curry on a minutes restriction, highly competitive come the fourth quarter, he's already hit his limit as far as his time, and then we have a 3-point game necessarily. I'm just saying, like, wouldn't it make more national attention, in your opinion, if we get to a situation like that and then he's not available because he's already hit his time limit for the amount of time that he can play in that game, and it's a competitive game that could be still won?
KD, if that's the case, I say let the player make the call on that one. If it's not like a medical thing that's involved with it, let the player make the call on letting them remain out there, because most of those guys are competitive and they're going to want to stay out there and they're going to want to finish the job anyway. But if we're in a game where, say, we're up by 30 or we're down by 30, play the minutes restrictions game on it if you have to. It goes out the window if you end up in a competitive game, of course, but go in with the game plan of at least having a minutes restriction. I'm bringing this up because at least you can say that the guys out there playing.
So it sounds like it's more of a situational type of situation where you're saying, based off of the circumstances surrounding the game, we will dictate whether that player is on a minutes restriction or if we're going to continue to just let them player go out. Let's say you said 25 minutes. He decides to play 25 minutes, but the game dictates that we may need you down the stretch of the last 4 minutes of the game. We can let you. We can adjust on the fly, basically, to give him that time to go out and win us the game. So I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. I think that it's going to be something that where coaches would have to adapt to a lot of this. But like you said, it's kind of now where we're getting to the point where if it's going to be like where players are not going to play, let's say they're not going to play primetime games or they're not going to play national TV games, which is more where they're incentivized to actually play, because we've seen guys miss a week or miss 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, national TV game rolls around, Madison Square Garden, guy gets up to play that he's been hurt for the last 2 weeks. I mean, I don't know, but I just want it to be one of those things where the league isn't forced to do as much and the players aren't forced to play through injuries that could, possibly derail their career.
Oh, yeah. Listen, if it's an injury that you're out there dealing with, sit out. Do what you have to do. But if it's a case of just rest and load management, nah, man, get out there and play. Even if you're not going to play the full game, get out there and play. Do something. I believe that could help rectify some of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Your Atlanta Hawks got busy the other night in Milwaukee, going up to Wisconsin and absolutely putting foots inside of the Milwaukee Bucks, winning that game 131-113. And Giannis' second game back from injury and 2 games back, KD, the Milwaukee Bucks look like absolute hot dog water, even with Giannis out there on the court. Here was Giannis' stats in the game. He had 24 points. But here's something that really stood out to me. 5 rebounds. The Greek Freak only had 5 rebounds in a game. 4 assists, 2 turnovers, shot 10 of 15 from the field. Shout out to Okongwu, who had 21 and 8 in that game. Jalen Johnson for Atlanta had 25 and 9. CJ McCollum with a solid 18. Nickeil Alexander-Walker with 23. Dyson Daniels with 14. We did not have a Jonathan Kuminga sighting in this game because he didn't play in the game. If he did, they probably would have won the game by 30. So shout out to the Atlanta Hawks for going in and getting their job done. But what really stood out to me is just how bad the Milwaukee Bucks have looked since Giannis came back. They were starting to sputter a little bit even in the few games without him. Now, we came on here a few weeks ago, KB, and we gave a big shout out to Cam Thomas for how he had played against the Orlando Magic in a game where he scored 34 points, coming off the bench and only playing 25 minutes. Since that time period, he's not even averaging double digits in points for this team. It's safe to say that he is dried up, and maybe the Brooklyn Nets were on to something when they just released him for no reason. But another moment that stood out to me in this game was a moment of frustration where Giannis took the ball and just threw it in a way of where it's just like, I'm so tired and I'm so over this. I think that it's safe to say. Now, I won't believe that it's going to happen until it actually happens, because it feels like it's been the boy who's cried wolf for the past few seasons when it comes to this scenario. But I do think it's safe to finally say that Giannis's days in Milwaukee are numbered, because I don't even know if this team likes playing with him anymore. I know that they don't believe in Doc Rivers as the coach, because they don't even go out there and play hard for him as much as they should anymore. But remember back in January, there was a report coming out saying that the toxicity in the Milwaukee Bucks locker room is as high as it's ever been. And what was going on around that time period? The height of the Giannis trade rumors around the season. Well, he came out weeks later around the All-Star break and shut it down and said, I'm a Milwaukee Buck for now. I want to be here. I think his mind might be changing. I think he might have just been saying that for the good of the team. This will not be a playoff team this year. They will not even be a play-in team this year. And when you think about the constant that the Milwaukee Bucks have been since the 2018 season, actually 2017, going back to how long they've been in the playoffs, just a few years ago being right there in that championship window, to go from being a perennial playoff team to not even being in the play-in, and you got teams like the Charlotte Hornets rising up out of nowhere. I think it's safe to say, KB, that time might be up for Giannis in Milwaukee.
I mean, it kind of just feels like with me, like that this cycle is just never ending. We go from Giannis frustrated with losing to Giannis has requested a trade to Shams coming out saying that, yeah, many teams are willing to trade for Giannis. Then it comes down to Giannis saying that he never requested a trade. And it seems like we go through the same cycle. We just saw him earlier, a couple of months ago saying like legends don't leave, they attract or something along those lines. And, I understand loyalty, but there's loyalty to a fault, because there could be loyalty to, put pressure on a franchise, or there's just loyalty because you're afraid of your image taking a hit, a la Kevin Durant, because you decide to leave a situation where they're not putting anything around you. X, we often talk about what went wrong for the Milwaukee Bucks in this whole time period that made them get to the point they're at now. I'm still going to go out and say, when they fired Adrian Griffin with no real justifiable cause other than to bring in Doc Rivers, that's where I felt like it started to take a slow decline, and now it's plummeted because there was no real reason to do that. And once again, Doc Rivers is the product of what he has built. Doc Rivers, without these players, these marquee players that we've grown to know, Doc Rivers has not done anything outside of that 2008 championship. Let's just call it for what it is. No Western Conference Finals appearances with the Clippers. He is not doing anything that has warranted for him to get the type of legendary stature that he has gotten. And I know it sounds that I'm critical of Doc Rivers, but for rightfully so, because if you are going to be this labeled as this legendary coach, or he's one of the top coaches out there, based off of what? Because we got to start being honest with ourselves, because Budenholzer, he has a ring as well. He's a protege under Greg Popovich as well, but we don't hear his name being just labeled as one of the top greatest coaches out here in NBA history. Same thing. He has I think he has a coach. He has a couple coaches of the years. He also has an NBA ring as well, but we don't hear his name being labeled as, oh, he's one of the top 20 coaches out there. I gotta
say one thing before you continue with that, because you brought up Budenholzer. To me, Budenholzer shouldn't have been fired from the Milwaukee Bucks in the first place.
No, he shouldn't have. But I think when you're talking about just going back to Adrian Griffin, we got to understand he was fired with a 30-13 record, second best in the East at the time. I don't know what you can see as what would be your cause to fire someone who has gotten you to the second best record in the East.
Yeah, but who was the leading cause behind that firing, KB?
Go, I'm gonna let you take that one, X.
That would be Giannis from everything that we were hearing on that. And that's why when it comes down to any turmoil that's happening with him and the Milwaukee Bucks organization, I feel very minimal amount of pity for him because he is responsible for a lot of this. He is responsible for the fact that Drew Holiday was traded and they brought in Damian Lillard, even though he came out and said that he didn't want Drew moved. No, you put pressure on the front office to try to make moves around you. So they were going to have to move off Middleton or Drew Holiday. And at the time, Middleton's value had decreased because of the injuries that he had over the years. So Drew was going to be the piece that moved. Now, why did things not necessarily work out with you and Damian Lillard? I know that there were injuries that were involved with that as well. But at the start of that, as you said, KB, they had a 30-13 record. And even during that time period, there looked like there was no real cohesiveness out there between Damian Lillard and Giannis. They just had a very well-rounded team around them, but they had a 30-13 record. That was never a fit. Did Giannis go out of his way to actually try to make Damian Lillard feel like he was a part of the team? Like something with that whole entire thing just seemed off the entire time. But I agree with you about the Adrian Griffin point. But Giannis is responsible for a whole lot of this mess that's going on in Milwaukee right now. And that's probably why he also feels indebted to have to continue to stay there, too.
Well, yeah, this is almost kind of like when we were talking about the Myles Garrett situation in Cleveland. You decided to stay. But this is a little bit more than the Myles Garrett situation because Myles Garrett wasn't going up to the front office and begging them to make moves to keep their championship window open. This is a little bit different, but I'm talking about when you have the opportunity to leave and you choose to stay. Now, while Giannis wanted them to go out there and get Damian Lillard, I think that Drew Holiday fit more of their play style of how they, I felt like that he fit that team way better than Damian Lillard fit that team. I felt that with, yes, I think that you had, Damian Lillard, of course, he was the flashy option. He was, riding away in Portland. They had no clear direction. So it made sense for why he wanted to leave. I just didn't feel at the time that, Drew Holiday was the reason that they weren't, that their championship window was closing. I think that Giannis, you're right. He has some type of feeling that he has to stay because he helped create this mess. He is a product of his environment, literally, that he helped create.
One other thing, too, when it comes down to Mr. Antetokounmpo, what have you seen improve in his game since that 2021 championship? What area of his game have you seen that has honestly improved since then? It's not free throw shooting. It's not jump shooting. What area of his game have you seen those improvements in where he could be doing more to help his team?
I haven't seen any. I feel like he is the same player. I feel like that while he has been dominant when he's playing, he can go out and get you 35 and 13 without really breaking a sweat. He can do that. But he still has not been able to stretch the defense as much as I would like, as far as because if you're going to have guys in the paint like right now, they have Miles Turner. Miles Turner is not your traditional type of center. For the simple fact, Miles Turner struggles to get 5 rebounds a game. He is not. He wants to stretch the floor. And the reason why I say that I feel that Giannis didn't improve when it came to just jump shooting or just stretching the floor to the three-point shot. We see guys like Andre Drummond who have been he has had a terrible career shooting the three. He even improved to where he's at least respectable now. That is the problem that I have with some of the guys in the NBA. It's like we've seen guys revolutionize their career and actually change the trajectory and give them a little bit of more time in the NBA based off the fact that they were able to adjust the way that the NBA is played now.
KB, I'm gonna throw one better at you, and you'll appreciate this one more than Andre Drummond. The way that Al Horford plays the game now, and the way he's played it for, I would say, about the past 8 years, that's not the Al Horford that played with the Atlanta Hawks. He's a totally different type of basketball player.
Al Horford went from working on the block to working in the mid range to now he is a 3-point shooter that you have to go out and guard. So that's what I'm saying with Giannis. It's just like if Giannis were to develop a 3-point shot, we've said this for years, he'd be unguardable. There literally be nothing that you could do with him. He can pass out of double teams. He can literally see the floor with vision that only a few can. He can dominate from his position all day long.
And here's the crazy part about all of this, if you think about it. He came into the league, and even though he was very skinny at the time, he was more of a perimeter type of player when he first came into the league. So it's like, did putting on all that weight and all that muscle decrease your ability of being able to play the perimeter game? You would think that that shouldn't have happened like that. And I know that there are going to be people that listen to this and say, well, are you guys actually looking at his percentages? His percentages have increased actually from the perimeter over the years. I'm looking at what actually happens in real time, in the moments when it really matters, in the playoffs, and you need that man to go get you a shot. And he can't get down there on the block.
And I'm looking at it, is he considered a threat? We could talk about percentages, but sometimes they don't tell the whole story. We can talk about a lot of things with Giannis, but Giannis is not a threat from the three-point line. Can he make them? Sure. I mean, I guess any NBA player can make a three if you leave him open enough, but the thing is he a threat? I don't feel that he's a threat from that position. I don't feel like he's even that much of a threat. Like, you feel like you won the position if you get him to take a three. I don't care if it's wide open or not. You feel like you won that position. You feel like you won that position even if you get him to take a tough contested free throw line jump shot, because that's still better than him attacking the paint. Him rim running is one of the hardest things to cover. So if I get him to take a three, I don't care if it's minimal contest or if it's wide open. I feel like I won that position if I get him to take a three. So yes, I do look at him that his game has to grow, especially because what have we seen from the stars that get later on in their career that dominate off of physicality? Eventually, Father Time eventually takes a toll on some of that physicality because
they don't age very well.
Yeah, and those hits add up. Those hits add up because, yeah, you can brush them off now when you're 25 or when you're 28, but what about when you're 36? Those hits add up. So he has to adjust his
that
game.
Really stands out with me for when it comes to our childhood, who we grew up watching, is Jermaine O'Neal.
That's a good one. That's a good one. But even when we're talking about guys like Chris Bosh used to work mid-range all day long. He was effective in the paint. Once he got to Miami, what did he become? An effective three-point shooter. He changed the way he played for the simple fact that is exactly what the Miami Heat needed. They needed someone that could stretch the floor, but also could still do the things that made him great, but still stretch the floor and be effective at that. Chris Bosh changed his game based off of the surrounding pieces that they had on the team, and it worked well because they won 2 out of 4.
I do want to say this, though, because you bring up Giannis needing to be a better three-point shooter. I'm not necessarily asking for him to be a better three-point shooter, but you can at least develop a consistent mid-range shot like Zach Randolph and Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan and Dirk Nowitzki had. No, I don't need you to stretch the floor like Dirk did, because the Bucks have at least tried to surround him with shooters. They need to show up when it's time for them to play as well. But yeah, a lot of what's happened right now is on the shoulders of Giannis Antetokounmpo. And honestly, that's why I believe he's so hell-bent on wanting to remain loyal to this team, because he knows deep down that he is responsible for why a lot of this has now gone sideways. And there is no easy fix out of it. The fix, honestly, is to move off Giannis, get as much as you can for him, and completely start rebuilding your team. It's just time for this era to end up coming to an end. I don't see how they're going to be able to continue to build a championship window around him while he's still there. And you might want to go ahead and try to capitalize on that this summer. Because here's something else we've also noticed, KB, over the past 2 years when these rumors first started up. The amount of teams that actually want to trade from him, they're decreasing. And they're decreasing because he's getting older. The injuries are starting to add up. And it just looks like his game is not going to age well.
And it seems like the asking price for what his game has not, like, he hasn't improved on certain things in his game, but the asking price seems to be astronomical for what you would have to give up. And so, like you said, If you are going to do it, you need to do it this offseason. The time of waiting around to say, oh, well, we could just hold on to him. You could. But just like when we seen a couple of the trades that went before, remember when the Hawks were willing to give up Jalen Johnson to get Giannis? And then now we see how Jalen Johnson has ascended this season and how that basically went off the table. Those were real conversations a year ago. But now we get to the point now where Giannis getting more up in age, injuries starting to occur. His game is still what his game is. But you seeing some of these superstars or now young stars that are improving, now teams are less likely to give you a guy like that to build around. Because to be honest with you, Jalen Johnson, and this is going to sound crazy, Jalen Johnson game is not as is not he's not going to be as a dominant force as Giannis, but Jalen Johnson fits well. I feel like that if you were to make a trade for Jalen Johnson right now, not only would you not have to give up as much, but he could plug into an offense a little bit better than Giannis could. Just because of the fact that Jalen Johnson is a triple threat. He can literally pass, rebound, he can score. And he is a 3-level scorer. He can score from inside, mid-range, and from outside, something that Giannis cannot do consistently. Giannis is a paint threat. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Jalen Johnson is the player of Giannis, but he's more durable. He's younger. He can do more. Right now, I'm talking about currently, we're not talking about what he did. And Giannis can be a top 3 player at his peak. He's a top 3 player. That's what it is. Best player in his position as far as a power forward goes. But we're talking about the NBA and where it's going. Giannis has to develop something else. I'm not trying to say that Jalen Johnson is a better player than Giannis. But when we're talking about where you could plug Jalen Johnson in and where you would plug a Giannis in, who's going to be more durable? Who do you feel like can do more on an offensive standpoint? Now, Giannis is a much better defender. I'll give him that. Much better rebounder. I'll give him that. But when we're talking about, like, if you were talking about making a trade right now, I think teams would be more susceptible to make a trade for a Jalen Johnson as opposed to a Giannis Antetokounmpo, just because of what they would have to give up, first of all.
Well, that's, of course, if those teams are not ran like the Sacramento Kings, who don't know what the hell they're doing. I want to close out this topic by simply asking you one question, though, when it does come down to this entire thing. Because you brought up, and I brought it up briefly too, Giannis needing to do more to add to his game. I know it's hard to believe that time is going by this fast, but he is now in year 13 as a player. Do you honestly think at this point that he's even willing to do those things?
I'll say yes, because like I said, just for him to go from that skinny kid to the monster he is now, I do think that he does have that work ethic where he wants to be great. So yes, I will say that he would at least try to put some type of different elements and add little things to his game, because like I said, he is unstoppable when healthy. He's unstoppable because, like I said, when I'll take it back 5 years ago, Giannis was the thing that made them go. He was the engine. So literally that series against the Hawks in 2021, that Eastern Conference Finals, you take out Giannis from that entire series, and it was a possibility that a lot of people were looking at the Hawks like, okay, this is your chance. They didn't get it done. Milwaukee still did it, even with Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday playing out of their minds. Bobby Porter's playing outside of their minds. But we knew that they can win a series. They couldn't win a championship without Giannis. So I do think that Giannis, just because of who he is, his mindset of wanting to be better and get better, he would make those improvements. I just don't see him, resting on his morals at this point and not improving on the things that could make him, you could see he has that potential of being top 10 all time. Great. He has that potential. I'm not saying he will get there, but he has the potential to be a top 10 player of all time.
He definitely has the potential to do it. He's already a top 20 player of all time. And I'm not questioning his work ethic in any way. And I know that you weren't saying that I was questioning his work ethic. I'm just bringing up the simple fact that sometimes people do something for so long, and after it gets them so far with it, they kind of get stuck in their ways with it. We've seen it happen in different sports with different athletes, with different things. I want to go ahead and get to some quick hitters. We got to start off with some trades that happened in the NFL. And KB, I'm a man of many nicknames, but one that I recently coined myself in the past couple of months was the clairvoyant. Because with our good friend Matt Craig, he calls himself the prophet. So I needed to find another name for myself in that realm as well. So it is the clairvoyant. And if you'll remember a couple of shows ago we did, one of the wide receiver names that I brought up for the Buffalo Bills was going after DJ Moore. I said it's not a flashy name, but it is a guy that I believe that will end up being very productive because I believe that he is still a much better player than his numbers indicated. Numbers don't always tell the full story. You have to look at the team that he was playing on and the way that offense was ran. Having multiple running backs, a quarterback that runs the ball, and other weapons around you like two really good tight ends, other young wide receivers that you could tell that they were now moving towards. And what do you know? On Thursday afternoon, the clairvoyant strikes again, ladies and gentlemen. DJ Moore was officially announced to be traded to the Buffalo Bills. KB, do you feel that they have solved their woes?
I do think that they've helped solve some of it. I do think that they need more because we've seen Josh Allen lose games because of his wide receiver group. Now, this is no disrespect to guys like Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, but they need more. They need improvement. They have one of the worst wide receiver cores in the league, just to be honest. Josh Allen needed a guy like this that can be a true number one, that has shown that he can be a number one receiver. I think that Chicago, it made sense also because like you've seen with guys like Rome Odunze showing that he can be a number one receiver, Luther Burden improving a lot. You kind of feel okay with making this trade. You got some draft capital back. I think this is exactly the type of, receiver that Josh Allen needed. Somebody that could take the top off of defense, but also work those intermediate routes as well. So this works for me. I'm actually gonna, give Buffalo some credit for going out and making this trade because they didn't have to give up a crazy amount. They didn't have to give up a first rounder to go get this trade done. While I do, see DJ Moore as someone that can help this team, I'm actually glad that they didn't have to, sell the farm to go out and make this move happen. So I'm good with it.
I feel the same way that you do about this entire thing, even though there are some who feel like that the price was still a little too high because one of those picks that they gave away was a second round pick. Look, sometimes you're going to have to get something in order to give something. Well, you're going to have to give away something in order to get something. And I do believe that he will have at least 1,000 yards for this team next season. He's a veteran. He worked with Joe Brady in Carolina, too. People forget about that. So he will be familiar with the system already. And a superstar quarterback like Josh Allen, Caleb Williams is ascending, but Josh Allen right now is still the cream of the crop when you look at those top tier quarterbacks in the league. And hopefully by this time next year, Caleb Williams will be at that point. But guys who are of that ilk, sometimes they just know how to make something fit like a hand in a glove. I'm not saying that this is going to end up being like Brady to Moss, but I do believe that it's going to be a much better wide receiver room than it was in 2025. Another big trade that happened the day before that, and this one shocked some people. It didn't necessarily shock me, though. And that was the Kansas City Chiefs trading Trent McDuffie to the Los Angeles Rams for a slew of draft picks. The Rams, they solved their issue with needing to get a lockdown corner once again. I believe McDuffie helped significantly in that department. And I believe that this is also a win for the Kansas City Chiefs, KB, as long as they do what they need to do with those draft picks, because this is a team, and I know everybody's looking at it like, you don't give away young thoroughbred players like that. Well, this team has multiple holes on this roster that they need to fill. And one of the areas they needed to improve upon was shedding some of that money to some of the guys that they gave it to. You weren't going to move Patrick Mahomes. You were not going to move Chris Jones. So Trent McDuffie was going to end up being the odd man out more than likely. They're still waiting to see what happens with Travis Kelce, but I mean, if he wants to come back, he's going to end up coming back. He's a franchise staple at this point. So I'm not surprised that Kansas City made the move. I expect this to be a move that Brett Veach uses those draft picks with to successfully help them rebuild the roster. And listen, this improves the Rams for right now, for where they currently are in the NFC and where they stack up amongst the elite teams there. They fell just a couple of plays short of being in the Super Bowl this season. They were a punt return short of being in the Super Bowl. And you look at how those wide receivers got busy in Seattle against them. Part of that is because they didn't have a lockdown corner to stop them. I think this is a win-win trade for everybody as long as Kansas City does what they need to do with the draft picks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that LA definitely needed some help on their corner, with their corners, because like I said, being in the NFC West, when you go and have to see Jackson Smith and Jigba for at least 2 games a year, and in 3 games this year, if you want to count the playoff, the NFC Championship game, I think that they knew that they needed some type of help because they didn't have a lockdown corner. Trent McDuffie's still one of the best corners in the league, and like you said, Kansas City got draft capital back that they desperately needed because of the fact that your your core group of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, those core guys, you needed to be able to get something back. If you're going to give up a star in his prime, then you do need to be able to get some significant draft capital back. I think that this helps Kansas City out. Like I said, shedding that money was a big thing because, like I said, these guys are all entering in, significant times of their career where they're going to demand a certain salary. And with Trent McDuffie, I just think that this was a thing that if we're going to capitalize, let's capitalize while his value is as high as it can be and get back what we can get back because I think LA, they needed this. They needed this to remain competitive while they still have Matt Stafford, towards the tail end of his career coming off an MVP season. So I think that you needed to capitalize because, like I said, you were a couple plays away from being in the Super Bowl and potentially, like I said, winning a Super Bowl. So you want to keep that championship window open as you can in LA. And while you're in Kansas City, all you need to do is be able to draft well, fill those holes in your team that you need to fill, and then wonder about the contract status of like a guy like Travis Kelce, like you said. So I do see this as a win-win. I see this as if we look at it, LA has basically said F the picks. We're not interested in the picks. We're interested in the championship window being open. They have, they have made it clear we will trade the picks if the price, if the player that we are after, if you are willing to let him go, we will give you the picks. We have no issue with that. And so, like I said, if they were willing to, trade it, then obviously they felt like that Trent McDuffie was the player that they needed to solve their woes in that secondary. And I do think that I look at him as that player, nice change of scenery. You going from, you're going from a team, like you said, that was on the cusp of being in the Super Bowl. So it's not like you're going from the top to the cellar. Like you're making a great transition that a lot of players would never get to make.
And here's another thing that he brings to the Rams as well. Championship experience because he has been a multiple time champion with the Kansas City Chiefs. So you can't ask for anything better. A player in his prime, at his position, one of the best in the league, who already knows what it means to hoist the Vince Lombardi trophy not once, but twice. The Atlanta Falcons are reportedly showing interest in Kyler Murray. They currently only have 2 wide receivers on the roster, but this doesn't surprise me in any way, KB, and I actually welcome it. I think that Kyler Murray's biggest issue, honestly, is the Arizona Cardinals organization. I feel like if he gets with a better organization or an offense that's going to be more catered to his skill set or a team that's going to be more offense oriented because the head coach is more offensive minded, I honestly think he can start to thrive. People can say what they want to say about him, but he is a very, very talented athlete. And I do believe that he can be amongst the top 12 quarterbacks in the league. And honestly, that's all the Falcons need him to be able to be, if we're being honest. How do you feel about this potentially happening for your team?
I mean, as far as the available quarterbacks, he's definitely the most talented by far. I do think that if the Falcons do choose to go in this direction, what does that say about the belief in Michael Penix Jr.? For me, if you make a move like this, Kyler Murray is not coming to be a bridge quarterback because even if you give him a 1-year deal, let's say $20 million, you're not making that deal if you believe in Michael Penix that much. Because if you do, you're just going to out there. You could go out there and get a guy like Mac Jones if you just need somebody to hold down the fort until Michael Penix rehabs from his injury. If you go get a guy like Kyler Murray, this tells me that he may be a part of your long-term picture outside, and you not as confident in Michael Penix as you thought you were. because the injury history has to be a concern. Like I said, you want to maximize the talent that you have on this roster because we saw that they franchise tag Kyle Pitts. And even though they may still be trying to field certain offers on him, you have two wide receivers on your current roster right now signed. And now you need to go out there and find, you have to fill out that wide receiver room. You have to find a veteran wide receiver too, someone that you have confidence in that can help Kyler Murray make his job a little bit easier. You have by far, to me, in my opinion, the best running back in the league behind you. You have weapons on this team. Now it's just about maximizing what you feel like you can be in. Because, like I said, this division is not one of the most talented divisions in football. I don't care about what's going on in Tampa Bay. I don't care about what's going on in New Orleans. I don't care about what's going on in Carolina. This is not by far one of the most talented divisions. It's actually one of the worst. You could be, this free agent signing could make you the best team in the division by far. Now it's just about, do you see the veteran status of Kyler Murray? Do you prefer that over the potential of Michael Penix Jr.? Because, like you said, he's still coming back from injury. Do you believe in him enough to give him another shot, or do you say we move off of this completely? We feel differently now because we have a new regime in Atlanta from a management standpoint. We got Matt Ryan. We have Ian Cunningham who came over from the Bears. Their belief, they don't have to necessarily give Penix anything because Penix was not their guy. That was something that was done by the previous regime before they got there. So if they put their chips all in on Kyler Murray, they could potentially move off of Penix. And that may be a thing come next offseason, possibly.
That's honestly what I think is going to end up happening. I don't believe that he's the long-term answer there. I don't believe that Matt Ryan has the belief in him. I don't know if Kevin Stefanski does either, but Matt Ryan's the big fish in the pond there. And I don't believe he has the belief in him. And another thing about the Falcons or anybody that takes a chance on Kyler Murray, do you feel that you have the right infrastructure in place that can help him reach high levels of success? And you mentioned they need to fill out the wide receiver room. They will. I'm confident in that. They have the best running back in the league. They also have a pretty stable offensive line too, for the most part. And that's what Kyler Murray didn't have for a lot of his time in Arizona. That would be so much more of a difference. You mentioned needing to fill out that wide receiver room, though. Maybe Stephon Diggs can be an answer to that because he was released by the New England Patriots. How do you feel about him potentially coming in and being wide receiver two to Drake London as long as his legal troubles don't end up being a thing?
Yeah, the only thing that would concern me is not the talent, it's off the field stuff. If he can beat from a talent perspective, he would be definitely towards the top tier of wide receiver twos in the league because Drake London has established that he's one of the best deep threats. Not only deep threats, he can work intermediate, almost like a Mike Evans, kind of like he can make every catch that you need to make. His catch radius is probably one of the best in the league. Now you just need someone that can work intermediate routes. Stephon Diggs, he revitalized his career in New England because a lot of people wrote him off coming off that injury that he had the season before. So I like the move. I just need to know that he's going to be all in. Leave the outside stuff alone as far as his legal troubles because like towards his Super Bowl run, we heard it all from the assaults with his personal chef. It was just too much. And I feel like that if you're going to come in, you got to leave all that behind. You have to be able to just play football because Falcons have had enough trouble as is with James Pierce Jr. We don't need to add that if you're going to be on that because, like I said, you are as talented as you are. We got enough issues as is right now, so we don't necessarily need those problems. We need you because we have no depth right now. We don't have that. If he were to come to the Atlanta Falcons, that would solve a lot of their problems. Will help help start to solve a little bit of their problems because, like I said, they do have certain things that they're going to have to address. You know, like I said, with the James Pierce Jr. situation and some of their free agents that are up for contracts, but he could help them in ways that a lot of people can't. Do I see it as being a realistic possibility? I do, but like I said, I think that the Falcons could get him for cheap, given that everything that he's going through legally. I think that they could give him cheap because this is kind of like a second chance for him. So for the right price, yeah, I would definitely go make that move.
One other thing that needs to happen if that move happens, and that's him and Offset. They got to go somewhere and sit down and break bread because you know that ATL is Offset's territory. I'm not getting into anybody's personal life. I'm just saying we don't need no beef in the city. So him and Offset got to sit down and break bread of some sort. Last quick hitter we're gonna get to, and that is the Cincinnati Reds ace Hunter Green. He is set for an MRI about elbow stiffness. Praying for him, wishing him all the best. That's all I can say. You never want to hear about things like that with a pitcher.
Yeah, especially with, these Tommy John surgeries becoming kind of the norm for these pitchers. You kind of could hope that, it's just elbow stiffness and he'll just rehab and he'll just get back ready to go and that it won't hinder, his season. But yeah, man, I really, hoping for the best for him and hoping the best for the Reds as, they try to make something happen in Cincinnati.
All right, we'll be back to part two in just a moment, and we got more baseball news to get to. One that hits very much closer to home. X and KB coming at you. We'll be right back.